Today we are celebrating International Women's Day with 4 preeminent authors on our panel. This year's theme is Balance for Better, celebrating women's accomplishments, forging a more gender-balanced world, raising awareness against bias, and taking action for equality and human rights. The 4 distinguished writers we have with us today are Rebecca Rodarte, an indie romance writer and creator of sassy how-to guides designed to empower women. She began her writing career in journalism and has worked as a radio reporter for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. She has held numerous jobs in publishing, marketing, and public relations, where she has always striven to learn new skills and keep up with today's rapidly changing technologies. Debra Falasco is a proud wife and mom of 1. After over 2 decades working in retail and moving up the corporate ladder, she left the business world to follow her passion. In 2018, she published her first novel and began a journey to fulfill a lifelong ambition, proving to herself and hopefully others that it is never too late to follow your dreams. Lynn McLaughlin is the author of Steering Through It. She values health, family, friends, and laughter. She has been a leader in more than one capacity, recently retiring from a position as Superintendent of Education in a very large public school board. She served as the Executive Officer of a Naval Reserve unit in Southern Ontario in the early 90s, when few such roles were held by women. She inspires us to become empowered self-advocates regardless of life's challenges. Ristaino is the author of All the Silent Spaces. She has her PhD in Italian literature and teaches Italian at Emory University. She was a fellow in the Op-Ed Project's Public Voices Initiative and has published articles in The Guardian, Pacific Standard, The Washington Post, The Huffington Post, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on child advocacy, coping with violence, and topics around diversity. Christine mentors and advises 3 student groups, including the Survivor Anthology at Emory University. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
So the first question is, what does gender equality mean to you? Let's start with you, Rebecca.
Gender equality, well, I always think of it first in terms of workplace opportunities, employment opportunities, but I also really think it's about just being yourself and being able to be who you are and share your talents and your interests with your friends, family, and anybody you meet. So it's about just being who you are and having people respect you for who you are and you're respecting them.
And how about you, Lynn?
I think it's about having equal rights, equal opportunities, being able to have a voice, being able to be leaders without having any advantages or disadvantages, being treated in the same way.
And Christine?
Gender equality to me means women have everything men already have: equal space at the table, a powerful voice, co-workers who respect and hear their words, equal compensation for their talents. In addition, women should be valued for their uniqueness, everything that they bring to the table that is not traditionally considered male, their innate enduring strength, their worldwide wisdom, their irreplaceable vision.
And how about you, Debra?
Well, it's kind of hard to add on to that because those are all really great definitions. And I think for me, it's just reaching that point where it's a judgment-free zone and that we're not talking about gender at all. That it's not an issue of, is it equal, is it balanced? It is just what it is. And that's maybe a pie in the sky dream, but I think it's good to have those conversations. But I don't think that, I guess in my ideal world, it's going to be eventually, hopefully, a non-issue. We just have to get that voice out there to get there.
And Lynn, I'd like to address the next question to you first, because you said you had a very different experience. Can you describe how gender inequality has affected your life, either in general or a specific event? You mentioned that when you were an officer in the Naval Reserve Unit, you did not experience any gender inequality.
No, not at that point. I did not, because I chose the path that was available to me. When I reflect back on that time, though, I will say that there were doors that were closed back in the 1980s. I'm proud to say that in Canada right now that all classifications and operations are available to women, even in submarines, but that was not the case when I was there 20 years ago. So certainly there were doors closed. We've come a long way in that regard.
So you don't feel like you had a choice of position that you could choose?
I wasn't interested in any of those classifications at that time, so the classification I chose took me in the direction that it did, offered me excellent leadership opportunities, and I landed the position of an executive second-in-command officer. So for me, and in addition to the role of superintendent, that was a lot of hard work. I've always been driven really to prove it to myself more than others. So I'm the person that even if I'm the underdog, I'm trying, and if I'm not successful, I've never said, I've never believed I haven't been successful because of my gender. I really have taken each one of those as a learning opportunity to say, what can I take from this and go forward?
I can go. This is Rebecca. Well, I think I really haven't had a great time, I would say, working in the corporate world. It seems like I have always, to this day, I've never had a position where I was just the boss or the top person. And just an example, when I worked in publishing on a business-to-business trade publishing company, I was the assistant editor. And when I finally made it up to a managing editor position, they brought on a man as an executive editor just so I could have somebody else to report to. And that position was not there at the time. So I've always kind of struggled. And I think really, yeah, it probably has to do with a lot of things, being a woman, but being petite as well in the workplace, and just not having those equal opportunities, especially if, some men have been in the hiring role.
I'm not only a woman, but a really short woman as well, and I'm 4'9.5" and I've not always felt heard, and I've been overlooked more than once. I remember being in an audience, and when it was time to ask questions, I raised my hand, right away. And I was in the first row, and the speaker looked right through me. She called on a number of other people, and then invited those who hadn't had a chance to speak to join her on the stage, near the stage, to talk. And I walked over, I made eye contact with her, and she saw me and then turned and answered the questions of a group of men who were nearby. And I finally said to her, fairly loudly, I was here first and my question's important too. And then she gave me her undivided attention. As I've aged, that's happened less and less often. But when it does happen, I'm filled with anger about it. And that's not really characteristic of me. I think it really hit something deep, something that's not so easy to explain, but raw and kind of uncomfortable when it happens.
And I would have to say, for me, as 24 years I spent in the same company, changing different divisions and different roles. And I think I was fortunate. I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I had strong female leadership roles. My boss was a female, her boss was a female, the vice president of asset protection for the company was a female. And so I never felt that I was held back from being a female, but I did see other people question whether or not other females got where they were because they were female. And then was that ever said about me? I don't know. But, for me, myself, I never experienced that. But it certainly doesn't take away from the fact that I can almost guarantee that probably somebody did. It just never factored into my career because I had such strong role models to help support me along the way. And I think that's crucial.
And the next question is, how can we maintain healthy, equal interpersonal relationships without losing our identity?
Okay, I'll either again, I guess. I think we need to be true to ourselves. Each one of us is raised with a certain set of values, and as we grow older, we could begin to question those values and adopt our own and our own new belief systems. So who we become evolves with our own experiences over time. I think if we can articulate who we are to our core, and we can stand and live by those beliefs, then we're going to be in a much better position to maintain healthy relationships as individuals and with our own identities.
I agree. I think in every relationship, we have to be ourselves, tell our stories, and be authentic. There are so many times women are shut down and they lose their voices, and we need to be able to say our piece, or the relationship isn't one we should invest in. Ideally, when we are with others, every cell of our body should convey who we are at every second of every day. And as a woman, this is our charge, even if it's uncomfortable at times, even if we have to call attention to unfair treatment, our voices and our livelihood depend on speaking our truth.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, because I find that I'm usually I'm on the other side of most tables. my family, my sisters, I have 6 sisters, and I'm the most conservative one of all of us, but I write romance, so I'm ultra traditional in so many different ways. But I think it's be honest with yourself, and if you're a woman but your opinion is not the status quo in the room, still stand by it. Don't cower in the face of adversity. Just be who you are, and that's, to me, how you're going to empower yourself. You can't be somebody else. You can only be yourself.
And I think it's I equate it to brand building because as I'm building the brand for Sassy Heroine, everything that I write or put out onto the internet, the images I select for my books, and some of the products I'm now creating, I think, at the end of the day, somebody who meets me now is going to know I'm a sassy heroine. That's who I am. And, I'm probably going to have some words to say about anything. I'm always going to have an opinion on something. And they would now know, getting into a relationship or a friendship with me, that's who I am. I'm #sassy heroine. So it's almost like, I think the advice for other women out there is nowadays to always see yourself as a brand. It's your personal brand, and everything you say and do that reflects to whoever you meet.
And how can we use our writing, whether in fiction or nonfiction, to empower women?
Yeah, and I'm just going to tag on to what I just said. I think women have to be empowered to be themselves. That I have never felt the need to explain who I am, or to justify why I am the way I am. And I find, as I get into the world of writing romance novels, some people don't view them as literature or as quality reading. And I'm okay with that, because it's what makes me feel good, and it's what makes me happy to write. And so I think that is important. And I think everybody should be able to have their voice. It's not a popularity contest. Your voice is your voice, and you need to own it and be proud of it, because there is no other you. And so you need to just run with who you are, and don't worry about what everybody else thinks, because then you'll get there. You're going to lose track of the vision if you start worrying about what other people think.
Good point.
Okay. So society often communicates that we should hide our grief and get over things quickly and not talk about our problems. Many of us have been told that to talk about our struggles is a sign of weakness, and that strength is keeping everything inside. However, I believe the opposite is true. Strength is talking about our realities. It's being courageous enough to tell our stories and share with others what it means to be human. By telling our stories, we can empower other women to tell theirs. We can model through our own strength and storytelling that it's okay to grieve, to talk about difficult experiences, to be vulnerable. Nobody should go through difficulty alone. And when we open up to others, we realize others have experienced hardship too. It makes us feel less alone, more understood, and empowered in our own common humanity. So modeling this, in my opinion, helps others to be able to talk about difficult things.
So you're saying modeling by example will empower?
Modeling by example empowers others to, you feel less alone when you hear stories that you can relate to and that relate to your own experience. And in my opinion, if we're not afraid to speak our truths and talk about difficult things, then it will allow others to do the same.
How about you, Lynn?
When I think about my writing, authors have control. We have control of our own time, what we say, how we say it. Sometimes we're guiding and helping others. Sometimes it's through our own experiences. Sometimes we create a fantasy world for people to go into. But I think as people are in our books and reading along with us, it has the potential of helping people see things from a different perspective and opening minds to possibilities. That's how I would say we would empower.
So the whole theme of my Sassy Heroine books, that how to be your own sassy heroine, is to empower women. And what I have done is I've shared a lot of my own personal stories in the book. I think of it as a chicken soup for the soul. I give them scenarios to see themselves in a romantic comedy, for example, and how does the heroine make it through? And by giving them a scenario, I ask them to then apply it to their own life. Sort of, okay, the sassy heroine went through all of these struggles in this movie. What can you do now, or what lesson can you take? So I think we take a lot from just contemporary fiction and from movies. And so in my writing and how to be your own sassy heroine, that's basically the theme. I'm kind of almost asking them to see themselves in a movie so that they're kind of seeing themselves outside of the problem, and that way they can come into the problem and help to solve it. And like I've said, I do it also with telling my own personal stories, and I'm going to write others because I think we all have lots of struggles, and even small things, well, not small things, but big things, like how to buy a car. If you find yourself divorced and you've never bought a car, how do you do that? And so I, tell my stories, and that's basically, how I hope I'm going to help other women.
That's interesting. There's a common theme of when we tell our stories, we empower others. So that seems to be the consensus. And as an author and a creator, inspiration is important. What inspires you, and how do those sources of inspiration define you or empower you? Where do you get your inspiration from?
I'll go on this one first. I think it follows on the fact that I like to watch a lot of romantic comedies and the humor that's in it. And so usually I walk around as a comedic writer, I can't help but walk around and have thought bubbles popping out of my head simply because someone will say something that I think is just so ridiculous. And so a lot of it is just observations from real world, and then I tell it in a humorous way. Sometimes because I can't stop it. It's like if I'm out all day and I hear all these different conversations, I just feel like, oh my gosh, that's a story that needs to be told.
I love it. So I'll go. I find when I do my book writing, my book signings and my book readings for Steering Through It, I'm in awe each and every time at the people that I enter into conversations with. Truly remarkable people who survived illnesses, many grieving the passing of a loved one, or in the midst of a separation or divorce, career changes. They find me and we have these incredible conversations, and it is just so inspiring. I learned a great deal from them, and that's what keeps me going.
That's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, inspiration, I started reading romance novels like when I was in my teens. And then, when I decided in my early 20s that I was going to write romance, I started my first book, And then 25 years later, I hadn't touched it. Yeah, exactly. It's like 25 years I wasted. Could have done this a long time ago. But the inspiration came from opening myself up to it again, if that makes any sense. I had closed that off. I was working. I was the asset protection manager. I was the district secretary. I was the wife. And I took the one thing that I wanted to do my whole life and didn't look at it. I literally cleaned out a storage unit and found the notebook with all of my notes, and I was inspired again. And I think journal your thoughts, even if you don't touch them for 22 years. Everything you see, songs. I'm inspired by the songs I listened to in the 80s. And that's what I listen to when I write my books. So I think that's, again, take those things that are you and that belong to you and that you love and keep them fresh. Keep them out in front of you so that you can keep being inspired. Don't wait 24 years. Don't bury your inspiration.
Well, it's interesting. My book, All the Silent Spaces, it was originally called Conversations, because for me, conversations inspire me. Conversations about change, about strength, all kinds of conversations inspire me. So, in general, people also inspire me. People who overcome struggle, sharing experiences and connecting with others inspire me. I love those moments when something clicks and when we understand something differently, when we see something new through shared storytelling. And I appreciate those encounters of vulnerability that we all experience during this type of connection. For me, these are the moments that inspire deep change within ourselves, within society. By sharing our truths, we ultimately connect as a community, and this can make powerful transformation happen. Also, my kids inspire me constantly. Their strength, their courage to face the world and talk about injustices and speak their truth. And my students inspire me constantly because they're young and they feel like they can change the world, and often they do. And witnessing their strength and their power within their community inspires me every day.
And women have unique strengths, I find. And I wanted to know, where do you think women get their strength from, and what drives them? When you think you can't go on anymore, how do they continue anyway?
I'm writing about overcoming violence, and so my idea of strength and my own strength comes from that. I feel as though women have been historically strong, and throughout history, they have had their voices taken away from them again and again. And this is the same with overcoming violence. Women have persevered and found ways of gaining agency through sometimes subtle loopholes, like women who wrote in the Renaissance and Baroque periods and during the Inquisition. But women persevere because it's often a matter of life or death, or existing or not existing, or having a voice or not having one. And when it comes to these things in particular, women are compelled to overcome. It's the only thing we can do.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to jump on that because I love the way you just ended that. What's the opposite? Lie down and you let the world stomp all over you, and you're only being a detriment to yourself and the people around you, your family and the people who love you. So in my mind, it's getting back up on your feet and picking up again and dealing with the cards you've been dealt with in the best way that you possibly can. I mean, as a brain tumor survivor, I can tell you I was on death's door. And you can just say, oh, okay, that's the end of it, or do your research, figure it out, and advocate for yourself so you're going to get the best outcome possible. And I would agree with earlier children. My children, I had, they're young adults right now, but they keep me going. I get knocked down, I'm getting right back up, and I'm doing it for them. My husband, my family, my siblings. Set the model and the example for others, I think. Yeah,
I agree. I think that a lot of my strength I studied history. A lot of my strengths come from the past. I look at where my grandparents were, my grandmothers, my own mother, and I look at what did they do, what was available to them, and my world is very different. But they didn't stop. You know, these incredible women. My grandmothers lived through the Depression. They didn't stop. You know, they had adversity in finding housing. They had adversity in finding food. I don't have those challenges. You know, my biggest adversity is trying to get people to read a book. So my strength comes from how do I take what I'm trying to do and succeed when at the end of the day that's not my livelihood right now. So I look at how would they handle that? What would they do? I look at my peer relationships with people, you know, and this is part of the inspiration. I get my strength from my inspiration, from the peers who have shared shamelessly on here's how you sell a book. My own sister walked me through step by step, hit this button on publishing on Amazon, do this next, you know, answer these questions this way. And you know, our strength, it relies on each other. I think literally, if she hadn't helped me that day, I'd probably still be trying to publish that first book. So I get my strength from my relationships, whether it's my husband, my son, my coworkers, new friends that I have met in the writing world, and it's amazing to me how small your world really is when you open up and reach out for that help, because it just literally builds your strength as well.
And for me, I think it goes back to research, because I really think that I'm always trying to problem solve. And so the first thing I do is go to Google, or just, you know, I'm always online, or I'll reach out in the community forums on Facebook on how to do a specific thing, or like how to publish a book. You're right. I mean, I didn't know how to do that at first, and now it's been 3 years. It's been 3 years later. And I just think it is also, and when I am researching, if things get really difficult, then again, you know, I use my own coping mechanism, which is the humor, and try to see myself outside of that. Like, okay, here's the sassy heroine problem, and she's having a problem with her computer, and what is she going to do? And then I write it down, and then I like to think that it'll go into a future book for future women. So researching and learning, and then sharing that with other women.
And this section is getting into challenges that you each have faced individually, and you can go into as little or as much detail as you want, your comfort level. Can you describe a challenge that you faced in your own life and how you overcame it or moved through it?
Well, that's a great segue to the title of my book, Melissa. I mean, steering through it, really, it was about the brain tumor experience, and I journaled from the day I was diagnosed, and it was a year later, and we learned so much, and going through that process, I thought, there's just no way. I want other people to go through this. I'm going to try to help. So my family wrote the book together. That's what it came down to. And it isn't just about having an attitude that you're going to do the best you can to advocate yourself. It really is about the mindset. Our mind and our bodies are connected. There's no question about it. And any negativity that surrounds you when you're going through something like that is not healthy for anyone. And it takes you away from really where the mindset's supposed to be, that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to do the best that I can. And I'm not going to worry about what's going to happen on that operating table. I'm going to think about, well, when I do wake up, I will learn to speak again. I will learn to walk again. And you have that positive mindset rather than getting caught up in the what if, or the I shoulda, I coulda, I'm going to, I don't know what's going to happen. So, but it really is it's keeping focused and not letting all of that other stuff pull you away, I would say.
So I wasn't sure when I saw this question if I was going to share this or not, because challenges. I mean, I think I've had them. You know, I was one of 9 children with 2 parents, and when it came to personal challenges, though, you know, my career was always what I wanted it to be when I wanted it, and I've always believed that the right thing came to me when I needed it, until I lost my first child. at 17 weeks. So I'm not going to go into details because that's not what it's about. But that challenge of coming from a big family, having wanted a big family, and recognizing that that wasn't in my cards. That was the one thing that I wanted, and I was not going to be able to have it. I had my son, used what I learned the first time around to have him. I took my blessing and I ran with it. I had to look at it as, this isn't about what I don't have. This is about what I do have. And so, as you know, that was the biggest challenge I've had to face in my life. I hope nobody has to do that. Someday I would like to tell that story in a book form, you know, in that memoir, but I'm just not there yet. And it's been 11 years. But I think for me, it's that challenge. Don't look at what you don't have. Look at what you do have, and believe that's what is right for you. And it takes 11 years, and it'll probably take me 11 more. But that's been my challenge.
Thank you for sharing that, Debra.
Thank you for letting me be able to do that. And it's something I can talk about, but it's not easily.
And I think writing has to happen when it has to happen. You can't force it. You know, I think the fact that you went through that difficult experience and you're not ready to write about it means that you're not ready to write about it yet. And one day you might be.
Right.
And when you are, it'll flow. You know, it'll just come out of you.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My book's about overcoming experiences with sexual abuse, rape, and an attack I experienced in front of my 3- and 5-year-old kids. I was beaten up in front of them. And so that I thought was that third experience I thought was my biggest challenge. And because my children witnessed the whole thing, and their, you know, big eyes and tears showed me that it was something I needed to look at, I started writing about it and writing about the conversations that I had around the attack. And it took me years to even acknowledge the first 2 events. And in fact, I wasn't acknowledging them even when I started writing my book. But after a while, after about 1.5 years, I realized I had to face the earlier violence as well. Really, that my whole being depended on it. Also, the well-being of my children really could only happen if we talked openly about the experience of their witnessing violence. And so as a result, mostly as a result of my kids and the pain that they were experiencing, I realized I had to look at the violence we had just experienced. And through that process, it got me to look at the other violence as well.
And so for me, my biggest challenge, of course, was my divorce. And that was 10 years ago. And that's largely what the How to Be Your Own Sassy Heroine book is about. So it's about what happens after the divorce. How do you start to put yourself together if you have been with somebody for a long time? And I think it speaks to self-identity. You know, I had to learn all these new things, like how to buy my own car was a big thing. I didn't know how to do that. And I had to, I actually had to just learn to be brave, because it's scary walking onto a car lot and, going up against people who do that every single day. And it was also about me trying to figure out who I was again, and what did I like? How did I like to decorate my bedroom? It was simple questions like that, but if somebody asked me back then, well, how do you want to decorate your bedroom? Well, I had no idea. I didn't really know. I was, so involved with being married and being with somebody else. And I think I was also just so interested in more of what he was doing than what I was doing. And I didn't really follow a lot of my own interests. And so that brings me to actually now How to Be Your Own Sassy Heroine, the next chapter, because it's been 10 years since my divorce. And I am trying to think about, I'm getting older. Maybe I'd like to be with somebody again soon. I don't know. But I don't want it to be the kind of experience I had before. So I'm taking a note from my own book, where I'm just beginning to ask via my blog questions such as, is Sassy Heroine ready to share a closet, for example? So now I'm kind of thinking, okay, can I go back and do I want to share half of my closet? What is that going to look like? And so, or, you know, what kind of fridge magnets do I want on my fridge? Am I okay with having some manly stuff around? So again, I think we speak to, you know, in journaling or in writing or writing the blog, it's, again, I'm trying to figure out a problem and, you know, what is the solution going to be? How do I arrive at that? And then if I can do it in a way that's humorous, because these are the books that I would want to be reading right now, like how to do it, but in a humorous way. I don't want all the real serious psychology stuff. I just want somebody to tell me how to do it so I can get to the end and be happy ever after. But it's, I think, just asking a lot of questions. So that's what I'm doing.
So you have addressed this already, all of you, how writing your book helped you overcome challenges. If you do have anything else to say on that subject, and also what advice would you give to women who want to become writers?
Yeah, after I've joined all these writers groups, and when I published my first book, you know, you're scared. You sit there with your finger for 5 minutes before you hit the button, and you're like, am I crazy? Because I couldn't afford an editor with the first book. You know, you're buying a pre-made cover, you're doing all these things, and I would encourage people, just go for it. You know, put yourself out there, because you'll never be ready. You know, I reached a point where I had to stop touching my book. You know, stop touching it, stop analyzing it, stop worrying about, well, these people aren't going to like it. Is it too steamy? Is it not steamy enough? I worried my first one was too romantic. It's a romance novel, and I worried it was too romantic. And so you just have to, again, that's that be true to yourself and put it out there. And if people don't like it, if you like it, then you did the right thing. And I think you have to put that fear aside. You have to be a sassy heroine, stomp it down, and say, I'm going for it. And then you got to work it. It doesn't stop with publishing. You have to really put yourself out there. You have to be vulnerable. I think Lynn keeps talking about vulnerability, and you are not, somebody keeps talking about vulnerability, and that stuck with me. I wrote that down. You are opening yourself up to being vulnerable, and that's okay, because it's just one more thing that when you conquer that, you've empowered yourself again.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit earlier about journaling. And so if you think you're going to be a writer, start to do that right now. Anytime you have an idea, you know, those thoughts that come out through the day, write them down when you hear those conversations, when you get, you know, this is a kind of a silly thing, but even I have a pen and a paper beside my bed. And when, you wake up in the middle of a dream and you remember 2 words, you can write them down and it might come back to you the next morning. And sooner or later, all of those thoughts are going to come together and start to flow, and you'll find your creation and you'll find your way. And then I agree exactly with Debra saying, jump in. There's so many resources out there, but figure out the resources. Don't waste your money on a lot of the scams that are out there, advertisements that get you nothing, all of these review areas that get you nothing. So reach out to the people who are already in the industry and learn from them. And then and make your plan for your launch long before your launch. You start advertising 6 months or more before your launch, and you do all that up front as opposed to after the fact, which is a lesson I've learned. I'm a year out, and I'm really just doing what I should have been doing a year ago. So
my advice to writers is to be patient with your story, especially memoir writers. If you're writing about an experience, especially if it's difficult, write what you're able to write at the time, but don't feel compelled to write everything all at once. As time goes on and as you gain distance, you'll be able to write more honestly and go deeper. But my book took 11 years to write, and years ago, I wanted to publish it. I kept, I was looking for a publisher for years, but in some respects, my book wasn't ready to be published, and I wasn't ready for it to be published. The longer I wrote this book, the more experiences happened, and that actually fit into the book, and the more honest I was with myself and with the world about these experiences. As far as experiencing sexual abuse, I was able to tell people about it. I stopped being a mediator and started speaking my own truth in day-to-day situations. And as this happened, I was able to tell a story that I was terrified to tell and share with the world. And it took time. It took 11 years from when my children and I were attacked in the parking lot until until my book was actually ready to be published. So every year brings new wisdom, and just be patient, accept the wisdom. Don't be in a rush to publish it. Really let your book settle and grow with you.
I agree with what everyone said. I think I have a little more unconventional advice, though, because I come from a journalism background. My advice to aspiring writers would be to take a Journalism 101 course. Just take one course in journalism, because it really teaches you how to do research. It teaches you how to come up with an idea and interview people if you need to, and just put your thoughts down. And at the end of the day, it will teach you how to write to a deadline. So if you are an aspiring writer, I would say even getting 350 words down on a paper, just do that. But definitely, I would say that my journalism background is what's helped me the most.
And we're going to finish off with a question directly relating to International Women's Day. What are some concrete steps and actions women can take to promote a more gender-balanced world?
So for me, it's all about expectations. We must expect to be treated with the same dignity and respect, as everyone else. And we cannot accept anything less. So if something happens to us, if someone says something that's offensive or wrong, we need to address it safely. Sometimes we need to get professional resources to help us do that. We have to address it appropriately, and we can't ignore it, because if we ignore it, we're sending the message that it's okay. And we're also sending a message to that individual that individual can continue to behave that way when it's absolutely wrong. So we need to speak out. That's my biggest piece of advice. Don't put up with anything else except what you set for your expectations, and speak out when those expectations are not met.
Yeah, I agree with Lynn. My big note to myself was share. Again, discussing with people, situations, and I've had people say, oh, well, just because that didn't happen to you. And I've said, wait, no, I never said that didn't happen to me, because I never shared it. They didn't know what my challenges have been, or, what kind of things we have gone through. So I think, speaking up, sharing what you have gone through in a positive light to bring it forward. And for me too, is being careful then not to do to others what we have had done to us, or to not judge others, or I think sometimes as women we can be the harshest critic because we are trying to empower, but by doing so we don't want to take somebody else's power away, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So empowered by sharing and by speaking up, but still being sensitive that this other person, I share things when it feels right for me to share it. Somebody can't come to me and say, you need to do this. It's got to be right and natural. But I'm fortunate because typically I usually do feel empowered to do that. And some people don't. Some people have had that power taken away by whomever, whether it's been a boss or a spouse, and getting that power back. It could be your own family member, could have been a teacher, that took your power from you. And so I just want to encourage people to be yourself, and whatever it is that drives you, that is your power. Rely on it and use it, and just keep moving forward, but share so that you can keep moving forward.
And I really think it comes down to just being a good friend. I think we're all talking about the same theme, but it's about having compassion, being there to listen to someone, and again, sharing your stories, and just being yourself, and trying to be a good role model. And I think through that we can achieve gender equality.
I think we mustn't be afraid to speak up for ourselves and for others who are being treated unjustly. We should challenge ourselves to make our voices heard and advocate for those whose voices haven't been heard. Many women lose their voices because of sexual violence, racism, or other injustices. And so every chance we get, we should create space for women to speak up. We need to tell and show women that their voices matter.
I love that. That's a great note to end on. Women's voices matter. All of the panelists' books are available on Amazon, and you can find out more at each of their websites: RebeccaRodarte.guru, DebraJFalasco.com, SteeringThroughIt.com, and ChristineRistaino.com. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.